Hi, my name's Jordan Roscoe, and in this presentation we're going to go over a few of the differences between AMD and Intel processors, their cost, their power, and their overclocking capabilities, as well as some of the things that affect their power. And we're also going to take two processors to compare directly between the two. And for starting with their cost, the most commonly known difference. So Intel is going to cost a bit more than AMD processors, but it's also known for running more programs a lot smoother than AMD will. AMD is more meant for just mostly for games, as most people see it when they're looking at processors. But if you definitely want to look at multitasking, then you're probably going to look at Intel because it's more known as a workstation, if anything. Whereas AMD, I mean, you might get it if you were just going to like surf the internet or just maybe watch a movie, just not really demanding programs, but at the same time, not just nothing. Intel may be more expensive still, but when it comes to cooling, AMD tends to get a little bit hotter than Intel. And when it comes to coolers, of course, you're going to probably want to look into getting a new one because the stock ones aren't that great a lot of the times. And with the coolers, you're going to want to make sure you that it'll fit into the case of that you're going to be getting for your computer. Whereas water cooling will probably more likely fit, and air cooling, I mean, sometimes the fans get really big and they won't fit into the case. But with power, both cores both processors tend to be sort of similar if you look at it in the way that if you have a two-core AMD, it's the equivalent of a one-core hyper-thread Intel processor. So I mean, if you look at them in that way, where if you're taking a two-core next to a four-core AMD, two-core being the hyper-thread, then that's how that would work. But another thing to take into account is when you're adding two processors, it actually doesn't mean you're getting more cores either. So you definitely want to make sure that you're just going for what you want. But as a comparison between the two, we'll take Intel's Core i5 6200U, which is a two-core hyper-thread, and AMD's 6th generation A10 8700P, which has four cores. So we'll go ahead and start off looking at their clock speed, and AMD got a 1.8 gigahertz, but Intel's is 2.3 gigahertz, meaning the Intel is about 30% faster. But when it came to integrated graphics, AMD was 2.8 times faster at 800 megahertz, and Intel was 300 megahertz. But Intel can be turbo clock speed up to 1000 megahertz, making it then faster. And then if you're looking at the score between their cores, Intel got a 1501 and AMD got a 1211. So I mean that makes Intel around 25% better. For the extensions of each processor, with Intel being on the left and AMD being on the right of this chart, as an example, we'll look at AES, or Advanced Encryption Standard, as pointed out here, is an encryption system that uses both the same key to encrypt and decrypt data. But as very obviously stated on this picture right here, the Intel has a lot more extensions, so it sort of helps you understand where all that money is coming from as well. So a lot of that money goes into the fact that it's got a lot more extensions to work with than AMD. But AMD, simply put, it's a lot more simple. It's a lot of people see it as more based towards consoles or something like that, whereas Intel is definitely meant towards more of a workstation, more of like you're going to use it for work. But for overclocking, though, which some people may or may not know of, um, it's sometimes as simple as just flip a switch, it's on, it's off. But you're going to want to look to see if it's going to be unlocked when you buy it or not, because sometimes they come pre-unlocked, sometimes they don't. And if you're going to go ahead and overclock, you're definitely going to want to look into a different cooling option, whether it be cooling or air. So for these processors, for the water cooling, the AMD's clock speed got 1.8 gigahertz compared to Intel, which actually got 2.8 gigahertz, with water and air being for the Intel. So, that makes, for air at least, that makes it where AMD was a little bit, not air, but water, it was not as good. For air, though, it actually got a 2.56. So, air's actually doing pretty good on that at that point. But when you're looking at, before you actually buy it, you want to make sure that you check out some sites. And one of the sites that I actually used in this presentation to get some of this, to get these two processors to look at, was cpuboss.com. And in this site, it helps you pick two processors that you want to look at and put them side by side and find these things. And before you actually go ahead and buy what you want to, if you need help deciding if that's really what you want or not, make sure that you find a program that you're going to use and go ahead and find what hardware requirements are needed for that processor. And go ahead and you're going to want to double check just to make sure that all of the parts in your computer are going to be compatible with the processor as well. And make sure that, of course, you've got enough power to support everything that you're going to put into your computer as well. But overall, Intel will be more expensive, but it has more quality as a workstation as well. So, if you're going to be just looking for a beginner computer and you're not wanting to spend too much money, you might want to look into AMD. But otherwise, maybe you just want to look into maybe getting Intel or just saving up until a later date.